Hello, Willa. Welcome to The Right Mindset podcast, where we interview authors, both new and established. Today, we are giving some highlight to an author that I met through the TikTok social media crazy place. Willow writes. So, thanks for being on the show, Willow. Willa. I'm saying Willa.
Yeah,
It's my accent. I'm from Long Island.
you're good. You're good. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. Yeah, one of the crazy parts is just for the audience listening. I would say 90% of the authors that have been in this series I have met on TikTok, the highlight series, and it's a really great environment. And you know, what is something that really appealed to you as far as being an author and going, TikTok might be where I want to jump into.
Well, mostly because I was familiar with it. I struggle with social media in general. It's not really my thing. But the idea of making short little clip videos where I don't have to think very hard about it, that it was it was less to chew on than Instagram or anything else like that.
It's straightforward. You can make a 10-second video, 15, I mean, 10-second or 15-second video. Is there something
Yeah.
that's interesting to you as being a creator that you want to talk about with TikTok that you feel you are encapsulating, or are you still trying to find your voice as a content creator on TikTok as an author?
Um Honestly, neither, because I don't even I just say whatever's on my mind. Maybe that's not a good thing. Maybe maybe it should be more strict and have a specific message. But mostly I want to be able to see what people are enjoying reading and to see what people want to read, so I can find out how to put my voice and my messages into a format that they're going to enjoy reading. And maybe that's not necessarily getting my creator voice out there for social media wise, but I'm mostly concerned with my writer voice anyway.
That still makes sense, though. Your voice on social media would be your interaction and celebration of rising interests to what's out there, and doing basically market research for your writing career. And
Yes, that's true.
that, yeah, that is your brand, right? That would become, because it's the thing, your brand is what you do, not what you say, right? So
Right.
yeah.
Very much so.
um and I don't know if the audience knows, but you write multiple genres. But when you write, do you do that kind of work where you say, well, what will sell, or what is the audience looking for? Or do you have stories that really resonate with you and you just kind of toss it into the wind to see where it goes?
Both, really, because my I would say it is one of my special interests. One of my main special interests is finding a way that words will fit together in a beautiful way that makes things descriptive. But I put a lot of myself and who I am into my stories. They are my brain children. I have created them from scratch. They're unique and they're beautiful to me, and that is where they are all birthed. But as I'm writing them and as I'm telling the story in the way that I want it to be told and the message that I want to get out, I do look for ways that will be more palatable to the reader. So in a way, it's really both. I'm going to tell my story the way I want to tell it, but I'm going to put it into words and descriptive prose that the reader is going to enjoy reading and is going to pull them in. So both, really.
And what have you, or do you fall into those areas where you feel maybe your writing is being moved more towards the audience's interests and less towards what you originally set out to write with the book? And how do you adjust that to make sure you can kind of keep your voice in there?
Well, I guess it comes down to writing to market. I don't necessarily write to market. So
Hmm.
I guess if that was the question you were getting at, I'm not so much worried about that. I'm not going to jump on tropes, and I'm not going to write a prefabricated storyline with my own individual characters. That's just not me.
Yeah.
It's more along the lines of following what specific aspects of popular books really touched readers the most. So like Sarah J. Maas's ACOTAR, that blew up like crazy. And what people loved about it was the characters were very flawed.
Yep.
And the relationship between the two main characters throughout the majority of the books were it was their romantic dynamic. So even though I'm not writing to market, I take those things into consideration, the romantic dynamic between those two characters or the way that she made them flawed across a bunch of popular books, and try and integrate that same feeling into my books as well. So it's a little different, I guess.
Yeah, no, you're completely, and the whole purpose of this podcast is so that people can understand the process that we all go through, because writing is not just
Yes.
one way. There are millions of ways to do it,
Mm-mm.
and none of them
There
are
are.
wrong. They're right for the person using them to their benefit, right? So,
Right.
um, now when you do find uh, what you feel works in the market through your research and stuff like that, do you ever come across something that is really popular and really seems to be an element in multiple books or sales, but you personally are not connecting with it? And how do you approach that situation?
There's a lot of things that sells really well, probably never touch. And like I almost all of my writing will have some touch of romance in it, just because that's what I enjoy to read. With but there's billionaire romances and there's bully romances, and I will never be able to fully get into those. And mostly I just ignore them. I let people
Yeah.
enjoy reading what they want to read, and I just don't touch it.
It's like, I don't need another 50 Shades of Grey.
I don't. I really don't.
But what if it's 50 Shades of Grey with vampires versus robots?
I would actually rather go to 50 Shades of Grey. That sounds like it would be fun. That
50
was an
Shades.
accident, but it's a good idea. 50
Let's
Shades of
make it
Grey.
happen.
Yeah.
All right. So, as the audience knows, at the top of the episode, I always ask a question that's pre-selected beforehand without your knowledge of what the question is. It's sort of like hey, let's get your perspective on these things. So I'm going to ask that first question right now, and let's see where we go. All right.
All right.
There's a lot of information out there on the internet about how the publishing industry works, an industry that is filled with authors and writers. The process is what it is, and it appears there are a slew of choices to take your career down. As with all industries, there are pros and cons to what one must experience just to get close enough to knock on the door, let alone once you get through the door. The question I have for you is, with what you know about the industry itself, what would you love to change?
Um, I guess it would be the difference between indie authors and traditionally published authors. I would love to see that level out quite a bit, because publishing in general is they're inundated with different people,
Mm-hmm.
and it's exhausting and it's disheartening, and it's turning a lot of readers or a lot of writers away over into indie, and that means taking a lot less than what they could get if they could. And it's not even necessarily about talent, because I chose not to query at all.
Yeah.
And one of the main reasons is I'm just not that patient, because sitting there and querying for years is exhausting and it's disheartening. And all of these writers who put their heart and soul into books, they're going indie, and then they have to figure out all of the different aspects of marketing your book and getting it to the right readers. And it's like needing a separate college education to learn how to do all of these things. I would love to see that playing field level out by quite a bit.
What do you think would illustrate that coming to fruition? What do you think it would look like if the playing field leveled out in your opinion?
I would like to see like audiobooks percentage that authors receive. That should
Oh yeah.
be equal, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
70% across the board. Whereas, indies are getting 40% off Audible, or 40% of what the profit is from Audible. Um, but it would also mean movie rights and options being more available to indie authors than they are to traditionally published authors. It would be I guess the marketing connections, having those
Yeah.
connections available to indies, either through a pool of other indie authors who have gotten that information in the past. I would have no idea how that would come about, other than getting a whole bunch of indie authors together and deciding to
Yeah.
make something better.
Well, there's enough indie authors out there to kind of pool their money together and create a studio themselves and then start financing smaller projects or starting to handle their own marketing and create their own publishing company. And you could still do print on
Yes.
demand in those elements without putting that kind of money. I actually come from the entertainment industry, scripts, movies, films, whatever. You know, and I'll tell you, the biggest issue about getting quote unquote, contacts or getting the able to pitch is it's really about the networking power, your availability to get in those communities, your availability to help those people within that community, and also establishing like referral power. Like you're saying, we should be able to go, well, you should listen to this person, there's an opportunity. The hard thing about that industry that I've learned over my 20 plus years is that, you know and I'm not knocking authors, but not every author has something to sell to every connection. Meaning, some people that
Yes.
I know would be like, I would go, hey, you should check this out. Might not be right for them. And if I don't understand if it's right for them and I do it several times in a row, I lose that ability to refer people.
Hmm.
That's where
Yes.
it gets touchy, really difficult. But I agree with you that there should be a system, a community of people working together
Yes.
to help one another, which, unfortunately, it feels like there isn't. It feels like we elevate each
Yeah.
other and support one another, but not necessarily like how do we work together.
Yes. It's because there's a competitive aspect just under the surface. It's never loud, but there is a competitive aspect between authors. I've seen it.
Yeah, and it's something I've never really like understood personally because when I was in the acting industry, like when I was younger and attractive, uh, uh, I would walk into a room and there would be like 10 people that look like me, and I knew they weren't really competition because it was 10 people that looked like me, but we weren't 10 people that acted the same, thought the same, had the
Right.
same emotional cues or triggers or whatever. And I say triggers not in a negative way. The trigger literally just activates your
I
emotional cues. Yeah. Well, I'm telling the audience, you gotta prep the audience sometimes. You gotta let them know it's a safe
I
place,
gotcha.
and I feel it is a safe place, and
Yes.
I want them to. I'm on your side, people. but
Right.
but the same thing with novels. There are only seven. I say it often. There are only 7 stories you could tell in the world, but every story is from our perspective as a writer, and that's what makes it unique. But there's
Yes.
only so many hero stories. There's only one hero story. They start off, they go through their journey, they have some crap that gets pushed on them, they succeed. That's it. But how it comes out of
Yeah.
you is unique.
Yes. 100% agree.
Yeah, and what is it you would say to the community if they were listening and they were ready to hear the idea that it is not competition? What is it you would want to say to that community in reference to that, going, we are not competing and we should be elevating? How would you talk to them about that?
Um, I I would start by telling them point blank, your writing is going to get better the more people you have looking at it, who have written books and who know what sells and know what success looks like. And that is everybody, because there's always somebody out there who is more successful than you. So instead of competing with them and hoping that you do better, you learn from them how to do better. There's no other way to improve. I could not have written anything that I have as well as I have without my critique partner. And if I had it my way, I would create a community where people are able to show their work to others who have found success in writing so that they can get that feedback and they can learn where their weaknesses are. Because too much, there's too much weight in trying to uh, discredit the
Mm.
negative comments about what you do, and it's not right because you're never going to be perfect, and if you keep thinking you are, then you're really never going to be perfect.
That's
So
right.
that that would be my suggestion. Learn how to take criticism, learn how to make yourself better because of it, and that starts with the community.
That was beautifully said. And when it comes to perfection, in reality, it's those imperfections that, like you said, people love flawed characters. That's what's selling, and it's because they're not
Yes.
perfect. And you have to look at your stories, especially your first draft, as not being the end of the process, and that it's okay if you have. This is the one thing, like I consult, so I help people. I'm a narrative consultant and stuff, and the big issue is the fear of change. And it's like, but I wrote it. I understand you wrote it, and you will forever have that first draft. It exists. And you know what?
Yes.
If you want to release it without editing it, go ahead. But I'm promising you, you should also do this version of the book where it makes sense. you know, like, you know,
I Yes, I have a journal, and it's just little quotes and things that I write down in it because it is pretty. And one of the notes in there says that the first draft is just the writer telling themselves the story. And
yes.
that first draft isn't for other people to read. It's just because you're going to figure out the details and the rest and how everything's supposed to fit together later.
Yeah.
And with my first book, I'm sure you may have seen this on one of my TikToks. I wrote the whole thing. I went through several rounds of edits. I sent it to my editor, and I had a cover and everything, and I was getting prepared to publish. And I went back and I reread, and I read some of my own books, like I read Akatar and I read some other things, and I realized I wasn't doing my story justice. So I went and started from scratch, and rewrote the entire thing. And it's worlds better. I can see it having failed the way it was the
Yeah.
first time. And it's not that it was a first draft. It was more I was playing it too safe. And
Mm,
now it's with beta readers and people are enjoying it. And I if I had stuck to my guns and said, no, it's fine the way it is, instead of realizing that I could have done better,
yeah.
I would have been very sad.
you know you'd have to be sad, because if like you put all that work in, it's like if I kept it where it was, and I knew it wasn't true to my voice, I'd be doing myself a disservice, and my writing and my voice. And it's good that you believed and challenged yourself to be like, let's do it. Because even looking back at like a paragraph or a chapter, and you're like, maybe I got to rewrite that, it's like, oh, that's a hill. But like a whole book.
Yeah. Well, I'm horrible because I hate editing, and I would just as soon rewrite the entire thing than have to go through and edit. So I am not the norm.
Yeah.
I can sit there and write 25,000 words and be happy.
Yeah. Well, I'm lucky because my beta readers tell me everything I write is amazing because I pay them to, and it's worked out. It really worked out. In my favorites. Every book,
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah, I
Yeah, they're like,
imagine so.
no spelling errors, no grammar issues. It's weird how it ends
It
on
was perfect.
chapter
Keep paying
3.
me.
Give me my money. I have one
Exactly.
client that I really love her, and she's amazing. And one of the things that we go through with the process is we're on what I call a zero draft, which is where we take the
Yes.
outline and then we sort of not necessarily write, but we bullet point and brainstorm through the outline to kind of mold each section of a chapter, and then ultimately the chapter, and then ultimately the plot points and stuff like that. And one of the things that she's having an issue with is even though it's bullet points. Remember, it's not like a written out novel, like the prettiness of the suns glints off the metal of the sword. It's not like it's just straightforward. Like this needs to happen. This people done right, and she falls into this. Well, I want to make sure this section is perfect and makes sense, and it's the best it can be. And I go, it'll never happen if we don't move on. And you have to
Yeah.
accept, does it hit the plot beats? Does it hit the character beats? And does it move the story forward? If so, then let's go to the next part, because we're going to get to the end and we're going to have to go back to the beginning anyway and take everything we learned and discovered through the process and filter that into the beginning, which then will elevate the story. And if you feel good at the end of that, great, move on to the writing process. But if you don't, you're absolutely allowed to go back and do it again and
Yes.
work through it. Yeah, but some people, it's hard to be
No,
like,
for sure.
yeah. When did you find a
I
way?
feel that.
Oh, you feel it, right? uh, again, just for anyone listening, there's a lag. Just to anybody. I'm definitely not trying to talk over Willa, and she knows I already apologized in advance before we started. Um, so with that though, how long did it take you, and what was your process to get to the point where you said it was okay to yourself to not be perfect and to realize that it does take time? Like, what was that process for you?
Um, it took, I mean, more than 10 years because I've been trying to write for 10 years and I was so paralyzed by anxiety over not being perfect and it not being this amazing thing. Um, and really what it took was reading some of my critique partners' early work, which we laugh about together all the time. And then seeing the same with my own. Really seeing how much I grew over the last couple of years and really trying to turn this into my career, that made me realize that being perfect isn't attainable. Not right it ever. You're never going to be perfect. You're always going to be able to
Mhm.
learn more. And it took me seeing my growth and seeing the growth of another author who I admire quite a bit, um, for that to really sink in. It just means putting your fingers on the keyboard and writing and writing and writing. And as you put down more words, you're going to see that it gets better every time.
Yeah, and for those people, for people listening and who are just starting their writing career or have been doing it for a while, 10 years is literally a drop in the bucket. It's This career is going to take you your life to find the story that you've been trying to tell since the beginning, but it's going to take all those attempts, even successful attempts, when you publish things and they have great responses to that. That book is not going to be the book that
Mhm.
defines you, because you're going to always be, even if people are like, that's their book. It's you as a writer always
Yeah.
going to, and you have to accept that it's all right that you continue that journey even when you have successes and failures. um, I do want to ask
Oh
about
yeah.
right?
This dang lag, I know.
It's okay. It's so funny. By the way, I find it hysterical. Okay. Yeah.
Me too.
So, what I wanted to ask is, as far as when you say perfection and all this stuff, and it's something that I do notice, especially with authors starting out or authors who have been doing it for a while and they haven't really, like, quote unquote, got over the hump and made it to where they feel they should be, is they'll read a book that's very successful, or they'll read works from an author, and they'll like, the book is amazing, there's college courses on it, there's whatever, but then they find like a misspelled word, or they feel the grammar's weird, and they focus on that, and then you realize why they're not
Yes.
successful. It's just
Yes,
like they're
absolutely.
they're
Because
focusing on the wrong
it's
thing.
projecting.
Yeah, yeah,
It's projecting. It's their own need for their work to be perfect that makes them see these very successful books with mistakes, and they feel like it's it makes the book less. It doesn't. It doesn't make the book
Exactly.
less. Now, if it was riddled with them, yes, that would be a problem. But a couple here and there. There was a meme I saw the other day about an author whose book went to print because they replaced pants with trousers, and and it went to print with trousers instead of occupants. Stuff happens. You just kind of got to get over it.
I would almost push back that multiple mistakes does not disqualify the project, because Commando was an amazing movie, but there's like 175 inaccuracies. And I'm not just talking about the helicopter that doesn't exist in one angle, but exists in the other angle. Uh,
Oh,
you know, or that they kill
oh,
the same 8 people
and
over
it
and
does.
over again. It doesn't. It's a great movie.
It definitely doesn't. But it does. It does for some people. I, it I struggle with it just because of the way that my brain works, not necessarily because I have a problem with a bunch of spelling mistakes. It just trips at my brain because I don't know what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
But no, if a story is strong, you can have mistakes in there, and they, to me, they just shouldn't matter. If you can understand what they're trying to say, get over it, read it.
Yeah, a great story is going to be a great story. Just like for stand up, a great joke is going to be a great joke. It's the performance. Obviously, if you buy a book that's supposed to be a great book, but it's written in a language you don't know, the book's going to be crap. You're not
Mhm.
going to enjoy the experience. You're going to have to translate it, or you're asking people to read it, and the way they read might not be how you read. So you're hearing this, you're experiencing the story different. And people have to understand that, successful people are successful for more reasons than they are good at what they do. There's so many variables to success that, if you look at the statistics. I was just looking at it the other day, actually, for a YouTube video I was making. um it's like 4% of the successful 4% of successful authors make a living at writing. Four,
Yeah,
that's
it's wild.
crazy. And by the way, there's like a small
Mhm.
group that makes 100,000 or more, and then there's a very small group that makes 1 million or more. And people are like, oh, well, there was a misspelled word in their book. They're terrible. Like, no, look, Stephen King's terrible to me because I don't like horror, but he's an awesome writer. So, like, like there's a different,
Yeah,
it's called,
it
opinions.
drives me it drives me a little bit nuts too, because I think the average reader, or at least the average reader in my generation and above, they have no idea what goes into writing a book and how long
Mhm.
it takes. That, this book I'm on right now, I've been writing for over 2 years. And I mean, I'm not doing it necessarily for the money as much as I'd love some. That'd be great. I'm doing it because I love to write.
Yeah.
But these are years of people's lives that are going into these stories, and
Yep.
I'm sorry if I put the E in front of the H in the, but I'm gonna I'm gonna need you to give me some grace. I'm sorry.
It's ERE, not EIR. Wrong there.
Exactly.
you know um I personally, this is what I make a living as a writer. I'm in the industry, and it's still a process that people, like fast writers, like I can write a book in 30 days, but that is not the book being finished. That's like the
Right.
beginning of the now. Like, and the other
Yeah.
thing is, like a Brandon Sanderson will write like 4 books in a year. you know, he's not just writing the 4 books though. He writes a book and then he has his team. He has his alpha readers, he has beta readers, he has his editors, and they're part of that. And he knows how to organize his time. And yes, obviously he has the time to kind of like focus. But the speed at which you finish your first draft is not an indicator of how quickly your book is going to come out. And a lot of people just get too excited,
Yeah.
like, oh, I finished it. I'll edit it myself.
Of
Then I'll make my
Yeah.
cover.
A lot of, yeah, with art 3D.
I tell people often, I say, listen, your goal is not to get the book out. Your goal is to write the book and finish it in the time that's necessary for that book, not to be perfect, but to be finished. And a complete book is different than a
Yeah.
perfect book. And obviously you have to be happy with the book too. That's clear. But there is back in the day when I first started in the industry, I was in the music industry. And there's this guy who is probably one of the best guitarists in New York, especially at the time. And he recorded an album. It was a blues album, but nonetheless, it was really well made. It was clear. The songs were what they were. But then he was like, you know what? I'm going to re-record the songs at a new studio. Didn't change the songs. Just re-recorded them at a new studio. And then he was like, I'm not happy with this. So then he spent over $40,000 over the next couple of years building his own studio so he could record his album at his leisure. But now he had to learn how to use the equipment. Anyway, my point is,
Yeah.
he never went anywhere. And in his mind, he's like, why wasn't I successful? I'm so good. I'm like, your first album took you 15 years to release, and not because you were trying, it was because you needed it to be perfect. And it's a killer.
Yes,
It's a
or
killer. Okay.
even because he was dang this lag. Because he was trying to get everything around him to work with his work instead of trying to get his work to work with everything that was around him. You can be true to both. You can
Mm-hmm.
get your words out there in a way that works with the current listening group or in our world, the current reader group. I feel like there is a balance. That's a pretty good analogy.
Yeah, you're right. There needs to be a balance, and the other element is you saw the TikTok because you responded, you liked it. The one where I talk about how Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was released, and then years later she reworked it and released it again, the same as Tolkien's The Hobbit. And that's the thing. If you write your book, just get it out. If it's complete and you did the work and it's edited and it is a complete product, just get it out. Because 10 years down the road, if you go,
Yeah.
there's a chapter that I feel needs to be in it, fucking put it in. Who cares? Oh, did it freeze? Did I freeze? Can you hear me, Willa? Willa, are you there? It happens. Technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Oh, you got it? You got it?
Yeah, you can always go back later. You did for a minute. You did for a minute, but it's okay. I was freaking out, like I wasn't sure if you were going to come back, but no. Yes, you can always go back and pull it in and rewrite it.
Yeah.
I have a friend who's doing that right now. She pulled her book and is going through a rewrite, and she'll re-release it next year.
Yeah, and it's just that, what is it? They call them reissues or volumes, So, there are
Editions.
additions. Yeah. So, it's like, oh, in movies, you always say, oh, that's such a perfect gift for the so and so. It's the first edition. It's their favorite children's book. Well, that's because there's like 20 or 30 re-editions of
Yeah, exactly.
it. Now, on this show, moving on to more of your writing process, and like I said earlier, everybody has a different writing process, and you know, um, what what are some of the things that you feel you believed was how to write a book that you quickly learned were not the ways for you to write the book, and then discovering your process? What was that like?
Um, well, I tried fully pantsing first and being a discovery writer in the sense that I just started with a single sentence and thought I could turn that entire thing to a book. I could not do that. It did not work. It took 8 years of me staring at half a book and not knowing what the heck I was doing. Um, that story is still on my to be finished list. But what I found, I tried that and then I tried plotting. What I found worked for me was just coming up with my 5 main plot points and then figuring out a way as I am discovering them, as I'm going through and writing from one plot point
to the next plot point.
Can you
uh,
still see me?
yeah, I can see you. You froze a little bit. I have a question about your plot points. So you say your 5 plot points for the audience to understand your process a little bit more in depth. What are the 5 plot points that you feel are necessary when you are writing your story?
Um, Introduction, the lock-in, and I'll explain them in a minute. The midpoint climax, the main climax, and the conclusion. So the introduction is just the very beginning. You're explaining who your character is, what their life's like. The lock-in is whenever she has a choice that she has to make, and regardless of what choice that is, she has to say yes.
Mhm.
The midpoint climax is whenever something big and crazy happens, and it looks like it's probably a good thing. Then you have your main climax where the big thing happens, and it looks like it's a really bad thing. And then you have your conclusion at the very end when all of the everything from before ties itself together. Um, so at least for that book, even if it isn't answering all of your questions, if it's a series, for that book, the main arc is finished. Your questions are answered, everything's done. And as long as I know those 5 main things, I will just discover my way through the rest.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because like as long as you know those beats, you can definitely write to those beats because you know you have to qualify them. You have
Mhm.
to how do we earn the rights? And with some people, one a hard thing I notice is that they might not necessarily understand what those beats represent as a core. What is a midpoint conflict? And maybe in your words, can you explain uh, uh, what you feel the midpoint conflict truly represents for a character's journey, just in general terms?
Yes, I kind of think about it in 2 different ways because you have your 2 climaxes in the story. You have your midpoint and your main.
Not at my
And I
age.
like to think of it
Ba-dum-tsh.
as how your character is going. you're 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 at the midpoint climax. Um, anyway, the way I look at it is you're going to show your character how they handle success and how they handle failure. Your midpoint climax is showing how they handle success. You're going to just throw problems at them throughout the entire book, but the first big problem they have, how they get through it and how they handle being successful um, in beating that big bad. And then when you get to your main climax at the end, you get to throw them more problems, even bigger problems, lots of problems, and then you get to show how they handle it whenever it doesn't work out. And that is what made it easy for me to come up with a concept for those 2 climaxes in the story in a way that made sense.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, traditionally, like some of the things I talk about is ultimately, your introduction, as you put, the Act 1 is their who they are and how they're capable. Like, but not necessarily showing them capable, but
Yes.
how they're capable. What are they bringing to the table? And ascending rise to the midpoint is showing them capable. These are their victories. But then once that midpoint comes down, you have the descending from the conflict. This is them finding solutions to solve the main conflict that's going to be hitting them at the end of the thing. So it's always interesting to hear
Yes.
like the perspectives and how writers look at that to again help you get the best version of your story out.
Yes.
Um, what is it about that writing process and trying to get to the midpoint to set them up for that finality, that resolution, um, that really intrigues you about the writing and the process in general?
I wouldn't say that it's necessarily intriguing, but I know that it stuck out to me as one that I could understand and grasp and work with because it's not so many things that if I make a mistake before the midpoint climax, everything after that is a mess and I'm going to have to go back and rework so many different details. Um, it's simple and everything is able to be changed because characters tend to be finicky and they will just go off and do whatever they want without listening to me at all. And I I need to be able to have a flexible I wouldn't even call it an outline, just a flexible guide that I can take my existing midpoint climax that I imagined at the beginning and throw it out the window and come up with something else that suits who my characters became up to that point. So it's not necessarily intriguing, but that's definitely what drew me to the process.
Oh, the idea of like how to kind of like manipulate, in some cases manipulate your characters' motivations
Yes.
to get them to play along. Uh, that's
Rude.
now, because you are a writer and you have a process, do you naturally just start picking apart like a movie or a show or a book while you're experiencing it and seeing those elements like, oh, this is, the midpoint, or this is the call to action, or this is the, like, do you just naturally see that?
Yes.
And how does that help you with
Very,
your
very
writing?
much so. Yes. So I call myself a literary vampire because I will devour these books and I will take from them. I'll can almost see their process as they're going through writing it, and I can see, oh, I can see how this might have evolved from something else. Um, because once you've written and you have learned about the guts of a book and you know what it takes to polish something, um, it's like throwing a rock into the rock tumbler. It starts out rough and gross, and then the longer it tumbles and tumbles and tumbles around in your head, eventually it's going to come out smooth and polished. Um, and I can almost see that when I am reading another person's book. I can see how it may have started as something really bare bones and raw and rough, and I feed off of that, and I find ways to fit that into my story, um, just by learning how they approached these different plot points, because you can still see those main five in almost all stories. So yeah, literary vampire. I love it.
So what you're saying is, as I age into the 80s, I should find myself a rock roller to help smooth out the rough edges
Mhm.
of my wrinkling. Okay. Is that what you're
Yeah, with polish. Don't forget the polish.
saying? You need to polish. No, I love what you're saying, and I love that you absorb these books, and that that's the other, Stephen King is famously quoted for saying, if you don't have time to read, you don't have time to write. You can't write if you're not reading. um so it's good that you're able to absorb, because like you said, you're seeing the thing you are training yourself to write, and those plot points to hit, and now you're going, oh, I can see it happen in the stories. And that's one of the reasons for the YouTube channel I created. I have that series where I break down movies, because more people see movies than they do read books, unfortunately. But I show them the plot points and I go, look, this is the plot point working out. This is, look at this scene. This is how they're hitting the beats. These are subplots. These are the main. This is good, right? And it's just something that's nice to see, because not everyone starting out has that superpower you have, from being a night
Yeah.
stalker. Uh, with a
My
need to
literary vampire.
literary. I love that though, literary vampire. Um, so okay. Well, you're writing, and you're going to those five plot points. What is your process once your first draft is done? Like, to get it from your first draft to say, I'm going to publish this in whatever form, self-published or traditional, whatever. What is your creative process from the first draft to release?
So I have not released one yet. I'm getting there.
What
This
would it
one's
look like
almost
if you did?
almost yes, just for accuracy's sake. Um, what I do so far, I finish the first draft and then I set it aside for at least a month. I refuse to go back and reread it or anything, because you get really stuck on these scenes as you've written them, and it's almost like you can't break off of that track. You can't change anything because to you it's supposed to be that way. That's how you wrote it. It's right. So if you step back and you create a space between you and that manuscript and you work on something else, and you fill your mind with something else, a different story in my case, you're able to come back to it with fresher eyes. And that works best for me. From there, you go and you polish and you make changes and you make edits and until it looks the way you want it to look. Then I right now mine's off at beta readers where they're going to read it and they're going to tell me what they like about it, what they hate about it, and then I'll decide what I want to keep and what I want to take away from that. Make those changes and then off to the editor. Once it's done with the editor, book cover, it's ready to go on pre-order.
Now that's
My
a very
process in a nutshell.
which, by the way, thank you for that. Some people are like, I turn the page and I'll write 17. It's like, now I noticed you didn't say alpha reader. Not that an alpha reader is needed for everybody, but have you ever utilized an alpha reader? And if so, like, what was the benefit of that for you?
I have not used an alpha reader, and that is because I have a spectacularly amazing critique partner, and I talk to her every
Oh,
single day. And we write a chapter, and then we send it to each other. We'll just exchange chapters back and forth as we're writing. So I guess I get like real time alpha writer or alpha reader because she'll point out little issues and things that don't make sense or that I might need to change as I'm writing it.
yeah, and for anyone listening, again, an alpha reader is someone that's basically there for the technical element of the story, and a beta reader is for the emotional experience of the novel. So basically, beta readers are like your audience. Like, you don't get a beta reader who likes thrillers to read your romantic comedy. that's mine.
It won't work.
No, however, a writer who writes thrillers can still alpha read for you because it's all about structure, not necessarily, I like that, Bing Bong, the sword wielder, fought a dragon made of toads. Like, they're not going to care about that. They're just
Cute.
I'm going to copyright that name later. All right, so
You should.
What drew you to the genre that you focus on? Even though I know you write in multiple genres, what drew you to the genre you focus on?
I write what I want to read. So if it is something that I would read, then I'll write it. And that's really all there is to it because I'm writing books for people like me.
So you're the Kevin Smith of the author world.
I suppose so.
Well, because that's why he made Clerks. He's like, I just wasn't seeing me and my friends up on the screen, and I was like, I want to see Jersey people talking about stupid things.
Yep.
And boom,
Yeah.
there you go.
But I mean, that's how I feel about the autistic community because there's very minimally represented. We are minimally represented. And
what do you mean
writing characters that I can relate to in that regard?
Well, that's
I know,
good,
like they, we, me and my people.
What do you mean, you people? That's from Tropic Thunder. So that's also a great thing is that you're giving strength, and you're opening a door in the sense of, people with autism or Asperger's or any form of what do you call neurodivergence? Is that correct? Neurodivergence.
Yeah.
So anyone with, yeah, they could fall into that fear of like, well, am I even capable? And the truth is you are, because if you want to write, just write. It doesn't matter. First of all, no, Stephen King, Anne Rice, Margaret Weiss, Brendan Sanderson, none of them wrote their first book as well as they did their most recent book. And that's the reality of this journey as a writer, as an actor, as a musician, as an if you want to be a dancer, you can go do Black Swan as your first dance, having never learned how to dance. It won't be good, but that doesn't mean stop or don't try. It means work at it. If it's something you love doing and you love the work, do it. Do it.
Yeah.
All right.
Writing is not for the faint of heart. You have to love it because otherwise you're not going to get rich writing. You're not going to get famous writing. No. You have to love it.
Yeah. Unless your name is Richard, then you are rich.
You might become, I guess you could become rich if you wanted to use Rich as your pseudonym.
Yeah, I am rich. No, no, not wealthy. I just have my name is the rich. That's gold,
Exactly.
man. So I love wordplay. Uh, no,
Me
I
too.
appreciate you saying that, and that's a beautiful reality to it. Is that that it's advice that I hear often, but like obviously you have to love what you do, and the reason is because you got to do it. You
Yeah.
have to actually. You can't just be like, I have a book idea, and then you wake up and the book is in front of you. like
Yeah.
perfect.
No, I know. I've been trying to create a self-writing book. It it's just a prototype. It doesn't work, and mostly it just laughs at me.
It just looks at you like, yeah, okay, today's not the day. I assure
Yeah.
you. It's like, well, all right. All right. So we're getting close to the end of the episode, and as always, I have a second question that I like to give to the guest. Again, this is pre-selected but unknown, and
Yeah.
this is a newer question that I wrote just recently, and I'm so glad you picked it. Um, so if E equals MC squared based on the no,
You're gonna get question marks.
all right, I'm just kidding. All right. What is the kind of advice you wish people would give you when you ask others in the industry for advice? I'll repeat that just for the audience because
Oh,
basically what I'm asking is often advice is given, but it isn't often the advice we want to hear. So, what is the advice you wish you could hear from somebody that's already established in the industry?
um, I it's advice that's already out there, and it's heard a lot. But mostly the number one thing is that you can still be true to your story and your vision and be willing to adapt to change. Because when you start out, your pool of knowledge is a puddle and it needs to become a lake. And what you see whenever you're in your puddle is very narrow and it feels like everything because that's all you see. But the more you write and the more time you spend in it and the more you research and the more you take in, um, you're going to be able to see writing as a full process, and that don't give up just because it gets hard a few times. um, so be willing to change, be willing to make changes in your manuscript that you probably might want to scream and pull your hair about, but that when you're done you're going to be glad you did it.
That's some great advice. Anthony Robbins is quoted saying, three elements to success is recognizing patterns that you have, adjusting to the patterns, and then creating new patterns. And that's what you're ultimately saying is finding the habits and the
Yes.
skill and discovering yourself.
Yes.
Willa writes, I want to say thank you so much for being on the right mindset. For people listening to the audio version, how do they find you?
You found me on TikTok.
That's right. And what is your TikTok is just Willa writes?
Yes, at Willa writes. I'm dense. Sorry.
Well, we're all dense in one way, or we just be liquid. But
Yeah, that's very true. Yes, it's at Willa writes, and then Instagram's at Willa writes books. Pretty
excellent, excellent.
simple.
And as Marty McFly's father says, "You are my density." Uh, you are my
Yes. Uh,
density. All right, Willa. Thank you so very much, and to everyone watching the
did I lose
show.
you again?
Oh no, are you there? I'm dancing. I'm dancing.
Oh, now you're dancing. Now you're dancing. You were frozen for a minute.
It happens, it's cold here, so
It's cold. It's cold here, and it's Texas.
just woo. Oh yeah, and anyone that's watching the YouTube channel, remember you could check out the description of the YouTube channel, and it'll actually have Willa Wrights information. And for anyone listening, Wrights is written just like our show, The Right Mindset, so it's Writes, for anyone listening. And Willa is
Okay.
Willa. So, with that said, Willa, thank you so very much. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And to everyone listening, remember, you got to keep developing the right mindset. See you next time. Goodbye.